Welcome to NEXTGames Dungeon Series. Now today, we'll be taking on Blackheart Haven on the normal difficulty. Now everything but the final boss of this dungeon isn't overly challenging, and a veteran win would be quite doable on this map if it weren't for that last boss and his skeleton transformation mechanic. Now this dungeon consists of 6 bosses, so let's quickly go over the first 5 so that you know what to expect, and then we'll move on to the final boss and describe how to achieve a win on that very tricky of bosses. Now the first boss you will run into is Iron Heel that we're fighting right now. Now he has several adds who assist him at the beginning of the fight, so be sure to take all of them out with AoE attacks while you focus your main attacks on Iron Heel himself. Now there are 3 attacks that he has at his disposal. The first is a heavy attack that can do moderate damage and knock you down. Block to avoid this. The next is Whirlwind, which puts a small radius AoE around the boss. Simply step back a step or 2 to avoid this attack and still be in range of most of the abilities that you want to use. Now the final ability you need to look out for, and the most important one to look out for, is Spin Kick. Now he's only going to occasionally do this, but when he does, you will fly up and into the air and then backwards. Due to this, you want to be sure that your back is always to the wall when fighting this boss, or you'll risk being knocked down to the area below and possibly dying from the fall damage. The next boss is Atarus. Now again, we have 3 main abilities to look out for. Acid Puke is an attack where he will damage anyone in front of him for moderate amounts of damage. Charge will do substantial damage, and you know it's coming when you see the large red line on the ground in front of him. Be sure to step out of this line as soon as you see it, as he's about to charge along it and knock anyone down in his path. Now the last ability you will see is Stomp, which is a circular AoE damage attack that has a fairly large radius. Be sure to step out of this while it's present, or you will again take a good amount of damage. Now the last thing you need to look out for is at 30% health. He will enrage and grow much bigger, and gain 20% of his health back. When he does this, keep the damage going, and finish him off as quickly as you can. Now this brings us to our third boss, First Mate Wavecutter, who is surrounded by many harpies that you will want to pull around the first mate while you kill them with AoE damage, just like you did on that first boss. Now again, we have 3 attacks that we need to cover here. The first is a normal heavy attack that you should block, or you're going to end up taking moderate damage and getting knocked down. The second is a Whirlwind attack, where just like with that first boss, you want to take a step or 2 back to avoid the red AoE circle around him when he's using this. Now the final attack is the most critical one, and definitely the one you want to look out for the most. It's called Shadow Volley, and it's signified by purple glowing hands that the boss is going to have. Now you must immediately interrupt this attack if you see it being readied, or you risk being one-shotted a few seconds later. Now on the plus side, this boss has little health, so the fight should be over rather quickly, and these periods of dangerous times therefore should also pass relatively quickly. This brings us to boss 4, the Roost Mother. Now this boss will teleport around the arena while the fight goes on, so while you're dealing with all of the attacks I'm about to go over, you also need to deal with that teleportation mechanic every few seconds going off. Now be ready for this, and also try to utilize abilities that will land once on the boss and then continue to damage them, as opposed to damaging an area of ground or location, as the boss is normally just going to simply teleport away from there. Now the 3 attacks that you're looking out for here are Fire Tornado, which deals a large amount of fire damage in a front of the harpy. The next is Flame Breath, which again deals a large amount of fire damage in front of the harpy. And the final ability that you want to look out for is the one that you need to watch out for the most in this fight, and that is Raining Fire. Now this can do a substantial amount of damage, and when this goes off, you're going to see her start to scream into the air, and shortly after that, fireballs are going to start raining down on your location from the sky. Now you must avoid the fireballs while continuing to get in your damage. So what I recommend is when you see this attack start going off, stay in range and continue attacking and getting your damage in until you see those fireballs start to fall from the sky. Then dodge out of the way and continue to move out of the way until they stop. Now this brings us to our 5th boss, Hollow Heart. Now be sure to deal with the 2 groups of adds that are just before the boss without aggroing the boss, and this is going to be a very easy fight, just as you see me doing here. Now the only thing you really need to look out for if you deal with those adds first, is the ice attack, which is going to deal AoE damage to everyone in range, but it's really minimal damage that you can easily cure through. Now once finished, go through the door just behind this boss, and you are on our final and most challenging boss of the dungeon, Captain Blackheart. Now you will need a special gear set to be able to take on this boss, as he has a particularly nasty mechanic that he's going to be using. Before that though, let's talk about everything else that's going to be going on during this fight. Now the first thing to look out for on this boss is a nasty heavy attack that will do considerable damage. You want to be sure to at the least block this, but I recommend dodging it entirely, as your chances of healing during this fight are going to be quite limited, so you want to take as little damage as possible. Now the next attack that you're going to see is the spin attack that we've seen a few times in this run already. However, it's going to do considerably more damage on this boss, so you really need to be sure to take those 1 to 2 steps back immediately if you see it being readied. Now next is a Summon Skeletons ability that will summon up to 6 skeletons to assist this main boss that are either going to be of the ranged or melee type. Now if they're ranged skeletons, you're going to need to chase them down and kill them before they overwhelm you in their numbers. If they're melee skeletons, they will actually run up to you, making it fairly easy for your AoE abilities or gear to take them out. Now the skeletons don't have much hit points, but the boss will be continually summoning up to 6 of them every few seconds, so they can quickly overwhelm you if you're not careful and staying on top of it. Now the final mechanic is the one that you need to look out for the most, and it's Skeleton Curse. Now he's going to use this every 30 seconds, and there is no way to avoid it. Once used, he will turn you into a skeleton which cannot use any abilities, and can only use light and heavy attacks. Now this lasts for 30 seconds, and then a second after it wears off, he's just going to cast it again. This means that you will need to keep yourself alive for this entire fight without the use of any abilities. Now to do this, I recommend specific gear sets. First, make sure you have a Ring of Pale Order. It's a great piece for this purpose, as it restores 20% of the damage you deal as health. In addition to this, I use the set of Bara's Curse, which creates desecrated ground and cures you for 750 health every second, while dealing that same amount of damage to every enemy in range. In addition to that, I use the set of Leeching, which cures me every second for 950 health, while again dealing damage to every enemy in range. Now with this gear equipped, you first want to start the fight with as much damage as possible, as you have roughly 30 seconds to get all of your damage in before that first Skeleton Curse is going to be used. Now once it is used, you need to continually run around and take out all of those ranged skeletons with light attacks, while allowing your gear to continually damage to the boss and any other skeletons that are in range. Now you have access to potions, so be sure to use those as necessary, and in those 1 to 2 seconds every 30 that you aren't transformed, be sure to use large AoE or healing type abilities to help you out until that next break. Ultimates also work very well during those brief periods where you aren't transformed, so get those in there. That's about all I have to go over for this one, so enjoy the rest of the fight, and if you want some more specifics on the gear I used for both the previous bosses and this one in particular, wait until the end of the fight, and I'll show you both gear sets once I'm done. Thanks so much for watching everyone, we'll see you next time.